Okay, we are back with part two of the Tom Weaver interview here on the Meat and Potato Show, Conservative Talk and Awesome Rock. We're filming it here on the YouTube channel here, the Meat and Potatoes 2012 Network on YouTube. So, Tom, I wanted to ask you, tell us about what you're doing for your voterid.com. Tell us about how you got into this. Tell us the entire story. Uh, bring us up to speed.
Well, I decided to run for Congress, and in 2010, and when I lost the primary, I wanted to do something to help. And I knew that there was voter fraud, so a friend of mine and I decided to start a show ID to vote. And the main thing was to get voter observers.
Mm-hmm.
Number one, learn what all the rules were, and to read all the state rules and stuff, which we did. We made a little video, which I think I sent you, where I dressed up as a caveman at
Yes,
the end because
yes.
I was showing my tablet of granite with my ID
And I
on
have
it.
the video of you from the 2011, I think it was, Tea Party rally here in Worcester, Massachusetts. You spoke at that.
Yeah, same thing. And it's really simple and very important that we protect our right to vote by making sure that people show their ID. And so we trained poll workers, we trained poll observers, and in 2012 I ran again for Congress because I didn't learn that the state of Massachusetts doesn't really appreciate conservative, middle of the road people. Because I'm not to the right, I'm not to the left. I believe in the Constitution. I am in the middle.
Sure.
That,
Right.
that's me. And so we did the same thing, and we went. In fact, we even offered Scott Brown, um, for X thousands of dollars or whatever, we would like to put cameras in 30 polling spots the around the state, randomly picked, and just monitor and record what goes on, which is legal.
Right.
And he didn't want to do it. Now, voter
Really?
fraud cost him that election with Elizabeth Warren
That's
in many,
right.
many
That's
respects.
right.
But that's okay. It's, you shouldn't want to be seen as wanting people to play by the rules. But we don't have people that get motivated to be the referees. And to be the referees, you have to show an ID.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can always show your neighbor's gas bill because that's got his name on it. At least you're showing something. And, and but we don't even do that. People say it is. It's funny the number of people that come up and go, "You don't have to." Yes, you do. The people that check people in, if they do not recognize the person checking in, they have the right, the constitutional right, according to Massachusetts law, to say, "May I see an ID, please?"
Right. Right. If the
They're
name
not
doesn't,
supposed to just
yeah,
take their word for it.
yeah. The name
Because
doesn't
if you
match the
think about
address.
how we started voting years ago, everybody went to town hall. Hey, Joe. Hi, Mike. Hi, Ed. Hi, Carol. Da da da. Everybody knew everybody.
Right.
But it doesn't happen like that anymore. So that's something that needs to be done.
Yeah, because we're a
Uh,
fluid society. Everybody moves everywhere. I mean, I just moved this year from one side of Worcester to the other side of Worcester. I was in a different district, and I
mhm.
made damn sure that I refiled my name, and it wasn't anything amazing because it was an election season. We got all the Charlie Baker stuff through the mail, and even Charlie Baker in one of his flyers, it's like, oh, register to vote. I was like, you know what? I tore it out and I said, you know what? I moved, so I'm gonna fill this thing out. No postage required. Thanks, Charlie. And I threw it back in the mail. And then next thing I know, I got a letter from the election commission in Worcester. Yes, your new address. But the reason why that was easy for me is because I went originally to Worcester when I first moved back to the city. I originally went, showed my ID. I'm moving to X Street here, and yes, I am an American citizen, and I want to register to vote in this city. And they looked back through my records. It's like, oh, you lived in Northborough. Oh, you were registered. Okay, so I actually had a record of that. So I did what was appropriate. But even with the Charlie Baker thing that I just told you about, It's just a mailer. It's just a flyer. It goes out to thousands of people. Who's to say that any Joe Schmo just signs his name and shows up at the voting place?
Well, that's see, and when you sign your name and show up at the voting place, again, you're given a provisional. Or if they have not seen your ID to prove that you're a citizen, then you have to show an ID the first time you come to vote.
Right.
By law. Now, and those names are kept in a separate book at the polling place. Okay, so all the people, all the fly-ins that they got, all the register by mail where they haven't checked out, but still, we don't. You know, it's embarrassing to ask you to prove that you were born in the United States, that you're a citizen. It's terribly embarrassing, and we don't do that. That's where I think the majority of the fraud is nowadays. Is the fact that Lawrence and Lowell, yes, I'm going to pick on them, and Chelsea and Holyoke and this
Sure.
and that.
No, go ahead. Right. I know where you're going.
They are registering people that should not be allowed to vote. The the Dominican population of Lawrence leaves during the winter. They have EBT cards that are forwarded to the Dominican Republic.
Oh my God.
Now,
Right.
I'm sorry. If you've got a job in the United States and you're working, you probably don't winter in the Dominican Republic, unless you're a baseball player. Okay, I'll give the baseball players. That's okay for them. But it is special to be an American citizen. When that judge in New Hampshire 2 years ago, during the presidential election, allowed college kids to basically vote twice. They could vote absentee from their states,
Right.
and they could do same day voter registration and voting. They had in New Hampshire, I think, what is it, 7 million people or something, or I forget what the percentage is, but 10% of the vote was same day registration. You want to know why people lost in New Hampshire at the last election and why Obama
really,
won?
Really? Go ahead.
10% of the vote was same day registration by college kids and different people that
Right.
just had arrived from Mars, had not received any word whatsoever that there was an election until they landed in their spaceship. And that's wrong.
And I recorded it on my YouTube channel. Here in Worcester, Massachusetts, there was election officials that were thinking about redistricting, and they were thinking about changing one district from the Quinsigamon Senior Center down here in Worcester to Holy Cross College. And there was a huge turnout there because of what you just talked about, that the college students will amass. They will come down, quite literally, their spaceship will land, and they will amass and just vote one side only, and we all know what side they will vote. And also, there was a concern about, because it's a college, any conservative voters, anyone who shows up with a conservative sign, you know how the polls, they always show up and they stand there with their signs, that there would be protests and all of that would be going on. And luckily, thank you, Worcester, for thinking clearly this one time. They actually voted it down, but that was the concern. That college students would descend upon the polling place and just vote Democrat anyway, and that there would be all sorts of protests and all sorts of harassments going on for anybody who is going to show up and vote the other side. So this brings go ahead.
We need to protect. At some point, when I talk to the young kids and stuff, I point out that at some point in time, we're going to elect a bald-headed somebody with no hair, and they are going to unilaterally pass laws that favor the people that have no hair. And how will that make you feel? Because I think the kids and stuff, as long as they're getting, they forget that we should have, that this is not, this country, a republic, is a representative republic, is ruled by the majority, not by the minority, not by the single person that's offended that somebody says Merry Christmas, not by the atheist that sues because, oh my God, they heard the word God. Well, that's twice in the same sentence. Okay. Anyway, this is ruled by the majority. And the majority of Americans are good people. They want a fair shot. They will pay taxes to help out for the common good, for the general welfare, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
But I think they've been hit and hit and hit so much that it's starting to lose the luster. The life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness doesn't have the luster that it once was because it's a constant fight to protect it against those that dream of utopia. And the only way we're going to get back is to have voter ID. And I think one of the reasons why nobody wants voter ID, and I alluded to this in one of the notes I sent you, they're fighting it tooth and nail because as soon as we have an established voter ID, the next logical step is going to be prove that the voter lists are only American citizens. And boy, that's where the battle's going to be, because that's where you're going to have registrars from the cities and towns that will go to jail for illegally signing up voters.
Certainly. Right.
And so they have to fight. It's almost like the gay marriage thing. You have to fight to get to, so that you don't get to the second question. And so, and that's what we did. We fought and fought and fought and fought and fought about unions and stuff, and all of a sudden it was just marriage, and then all of a sudden you have the court system saying, what's a little marriage here and there. So I am in favor of voter ID, but I'm more in favor of having independent commissions from every town go in, and the next time people vote, fine, you will bring a birth certificate.
Something, right.
Yeah, you've got 2 years to bring a birth certificate because we're going to validate the rolls. And then the next battle after the birth certificate is that if you're a anchor baby, it's going to be to stop calling them American citizens.
Right. Go on with this. I watched some of your stuff. Please take it from there. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you just mentioned the word anchor baby. Take it from there. Keep going.
Well, an anchor baby is defined as somebody that comes here and has a child. And so I'll ask you the question. If you've got a couple from France, they're French citizens, and they decide to come to New York City for a holiday, because the French have lots of holidays. So, they got time to burn. And so they come over, and the lady has a baby. Now, this is a man and a woman. They're married. They have a baby. Is that baby an American citizen? And I think the majority of Americans would say no. It's a French baby. It's the mom and dad are French.
Right.
They had the baby. I mean, and that's what most people say. Well, what do we say about somebody that sneaks across the border, or somebody that's flying from the Philippines and has a baby in an airplane? We actually call Congress back to try to figure out where the airplane was, to make sure if it was in American space, so we can call that an American citizen. Well, wait a minute. What gives the United States of America the right to say that the baby born to a Philippine mother is an American? How do we steal that nationality from that newborn kid? What gives us where is the Law of Nations, okay, which is a book by Vattel, which is a great book, you should read it, 1705, I think is when he wrote it. Where is the natural law that says we can take that building block, and what comes out of that building block are kids, and say, no, those kids are Americans, they're not French, they're not Germans, they're not Mexicans. They're Americans.
But even in the Constitution, it clearly states that the naturalization of people only pertains to slaves, and it was only written at that time to pertain to that time because of what was going on. And I know I'm beating a dead horse at that time. And so
it was because the Supreme Court. It was the 14th Amendment was to point out that Chief Justice Taney, in the Dred Scott decision, where he defined all black people as just property and non-persons, They wrote the 14th Amendment to correct the Supreme Court because that was the only mistake the Supreme Court has ever made.
But that again, that was written at that time to pertain to that time.
But
now,
it can pertain today.
Really?
Because, see, to be a citizen, according to the 14th Amendment, you are born or naturalized to be a citizen of the United States. That's what it says. However, I left out a couple words. Born or naturalized, so that goes together. And then there's this three-letter word which means you have to do both. It's called and. And a lot of people forget the and. And the next words are subject to the jurisdiction thereof.
There
now,
we go.
in legal parlance, that means that means you now go to the law of nations and stuff, and you need to, and as they wrote, as Senator Cass wrote, and he was one of the authors of it, this does not pertain to aliens, foreign dignitaries, ambassadors. This is only to here. You have to have 100% jurisdiction. So if you have a person that comes across the border from Mexico that's a Mexican citizen and has a child, that child is subject to the jurisdiction of the parent because that's natural law.
Right.
You can't take that away.
There we go. There we go.
That parent is subject to the jurisdiction of Mexico and the United States because it's breaking the law. So that kid is not subject to just the jurisdiction of the United States. Therefore, that kid is not an American citizen.
Excellent.
Period.
Excellent.
And people forget that.
But why? I was going to ask the question, why do we keep going down this road? And you just answered it, because we forget that. But
we forget that, and Jimmy Carter is the one that started it. Up until Jimmy Carter's era, we did not have anchor babies. Anchor babies is a new creation. And so what we're doing.
Thank you, progressives. Progressives love to do that. They're always cooking up something new. Come hot out of the oven this week only. Get it while it's hot.
Well, what it does is there is some specialness about the United States, and we are an exceptional country. And it's not because we're better than the Mexicans or the Spanish or the French or we're the French, okay, but the Germans and so on and so forth, okay. It's not. That's not the point. The point is we're the first country in the history of the universe to be created out of a war where the leader could have been a king or a despot, and instead we created a government whose sole purpose it was to protect the natural God-given rights of human beings.
Divine providence.
That's what makes us an exceptional country.
Yep.
Except for the United States, all other countries are the same. The government giveth and the government taketh away. In the United States, we have a government that believes that their role, they used to, is to protect the rights of the individual. Now we've strayed far and far away from that. Okay, but that's something that we should try to get back to. And part of that is protecting citizenship. I tell people, it's like voting. If you're not, everybody should be allowed to vote. Really? So if you are a member of the Lions and you're voting your annual vote, should anybody be able to come on off the street and vote?
Exactly.
For whoever they want?
Right.
No, that doesn't make sense. If you're a Boy Scout or a Cub Scout and another Boy Scout from another troop comes in, should he be allowed to vote for your leadership? No. He's not under the jurisdiction, if you will. He hasn't met the criteria. So we are special and we ought to protect it, and it should be hard to change the fabric of this country. That's why they have an amendment process, which is so damn hard. Mm-hmm. And people forget that. And then the other thing, and it drives me nuts, the progressives are, Congress has got to do something. Congress does so damn much. That's why we're $18 trillion in debt.
Exactly.
They've done enough. I don't want Congress to do anymore.
Right.
We've got 100,000 pages of rules and regulations. How free are you and how free am I when we don't even know what the rules are? We're not. We're not free. And that goes back to voting. We need to be informed. This is a special country. You want to change something? Fine. Let's put it down on the books. Let's do what the women's right movement did. Did they ever get a judge that said women have equal rights? No.
Yeah, that's right. They just put out they beat the feet. They beat the
They
pavement.
went out. They went out and they went for social reform. I sometimes think maybe they told the men that they had 1 week to pass it, or else, and we caved. Okay, that might be part two, but still, they did not use the courts. They did not do anything. They sold it. Slavery. The courts hurt the movements of freedom. King George said, no, you can't stop the slave trade in Virginia. Thomas Jefferson was
Right.
very adamant that he wanted it stopped. But what happened was people, the social fabric of America, came to believe that slavery was wrong. Yes,
Certainly.
it took a little longer in the South. It did. In fact, it took a war. But when you look at the North and you look at the expansion west and past the
Right. Right.
Mississippi,
Right.
that was a social evolution brought on by the people, not by the court systems and not by the fraud of
Yeah,
Congress.
that's called organic. That's called
That
organic progressivism, not progressivism through court and through Congress and through law and activism. That's an organic form of progressivism where people just eventually just got tired of it and eventually grew up and said, you know what, we're not going to do this anymore. We
that's
see
right.
yeah,
And that's the only way to change a society or to
right.
change the structure of a
Let,
country.
let me interrupt you one more time, sir, and I'm sorry, but let's look at the civil rights. Eventually, had Congress not got involved, Lyndon B. Johnson and everything, the whole civil rights movement and the civil rights laws passed in Congress, had they not gotten involved, we would not probably have the problems that we have today. We would not have affirmative action, some of the laws that we have today. Had we allowed it to just organically evolve, you're right, Tom. It might have taken longer, but it would have been more inculcated into our society as just like you just said about slavery. About there was a whole segment of society who was just sick and tired of it. It's like, come on, guys, grow up. It's like we're sick and tired of this, and we would have moved on. And eventually, as generations moved on, we would have just forgotten about it. But
In fact,
because
most of the civil rights was not because we needed civil rights. It was to get rid of the excuse me, the Jim Crow laws that were
right,
passed by government.
sure,
The
right,
people
thank you,
didn't want
right.
those. The people didn't want the Jim Crow laws. I grew up on the stockyards in Fort Worth, Texas. We had blacks, we had Mexicans, we had
You had
Chicanos,
everybody working
we had
together, right?
we had French, we had everything else. My dad said, the smell, the shit, and the flies, they unite us, and as long, and, as, and so we're all equal. And as long as a man shakes your hand and keeps your word, he's a man. Otherwise, he's something else.
That's exactly.
That was my education.
Yeah, and that's the organic thing. And here's the great thing about the American Republic is that, as we've moved along these 200 plus years, is that we find ourselves there are movements out there that are organic. Again, I just use the term. People don't give a shit anymore. They don't care. It's like stop thinking that way. But yet we do have certain institutionalized things that are going on. Let's look at Ferguson. Let's look at the case that's going on in New York City. I mean, these things are fomented and pushed forward by that government institution, that policy of we got to keep race alive, we got to keep these issues alive. Um, we look at poverty. I mean, there are so many things that are out there that are that can be solved organically here in America, which is our great asset here as American citizens. But yet we pass laws in our Congress and we have forums and we have all sorts of things going on where we have to vote and adopt rules and legislation and everything else, and then everything becomes mandated. And then it stops. It's like the change stops. It's like it's but then again change is forced upon us. And I'm wondering if the voter ID and the voting problem, I'm wondering if, because many states are moving organically to passing their own voter IDs, people organically are wanting to see the IDs. People organically are wanting to look at something, and are you a citizen? Are you actually registered to vote? Please, if you're not, please take this ballot here. I'm sorry. But I'm wondering if the government's going to step in and pass some sort of mandate, and now the organics of it are gone. Now we're under some sort of rule and regulation and law. And you know what happens when the government gets involved, Tom. They'll just allow anything
Well,
and everybody. Go ahead, sir.
we know the answer to that. What was it? 35 times states voted that marriage was between a man and a woman. 35 times. And you can estimate that probably that affected, out of the 320 million, probably 270 million Americans basically were represented and voted that marriage is a man and a woman.
70% here in Massachusetts. I forget the prop. But yeah, 70%. Same thing in California. It was the same number, about
twice
70.
in California.
Yeah,
Twice
yeah,
in California.
yeah.
And still we have court
Twice,
systems
right?
that said no, you're wrong. No, we're not. No, we're not
people.
wrong.
We're the people of the
Now,
United States, right?
if somebody loves somebody and they're same sex, fine. You want a union, you need to go visit in the hospital, whatever, that's fine. But it's not marriage. Marriage is a basic building block of society for the sole purpose of making taxpayers in the next generation. I know we kind of mess it up a lot, but that's what the purpose is.
Right.
And if we support that, then these little people that we bring up to be the taxpayers in the next generation, we teach them civics and this and that to care for the country. But that's beside the point. Government right now is so big and so huge. Our states have lost so much power. That's the other thing that gets me. I'd love to talk to you something about. I think the greatest point of the Constitution was that every state would be its own republic. We've lost that.
Yes.
We've got voter laws, we got Obamacare, we got the IRS, we have the EPA, we have the commerce clauses, this and that. Or more and more, if you really, really get upset at Massachusetts, where can you go to escape the tyranny of Massachusetts? There's no place.
There's no place. Right.
And that was one of the biggest discussions, was the fact that if the states can't keep their identity, the republic will fail. It's too big. We're going down that block. So I don't know. The thing I do to try to get is, you talk. I mentioned in there the Minute Cub muster. That's where I get first through fifth graders, and they make an air-powered marshmallow firing imitation smoothbore flintlock musket, and they put on a tricorn hat. And they march to fife and drum, and they tomahawk cannons, and they throw tomahawks, and they basically learn how to be a Minuteman. They talk to British, and they talk to American Minutemen, and this and that, and they learn about the American Revolution in a fun way.
Okay, wait a minute,
and
Tom.
my prayer is that someday.
Tom, I'm calling 911. I'm sending the police to your house right now. How dare you teach our children?
Let me tell you.
But you know what? That's what I'm saying. I know I say that in tongue in cheek, but it's like, oh my God, this is where we are, aren't we? It's like, I'm sure you've run into probably parents that are like, I don't think this is right. Oh, I'm not sure about
One lady said it wasn't right. I said, ma'am, did you see the picture? She goes, yes. I said, then why'd you send your son? I didn't force you.
Yeah, really. Well, no.
See, that's the other thing, too. Americans believe that laws need to apply with everybody. One of the problems with the voter ID laws is that you will always find people that are not informed that will go, oh, my rights taken away, and everybody goes crazy. Well, no place in the history of man was it ever defined that a law had to be exact for everybody. A law is for the majority. It covers the majority. Will there always be exceptions to the law? Yeah. There'll always be some loopholes here, a loophole. Yes, there are always going to be that. But you write a law for the majority. In this case, you can write a voter ID law. You can write a voter registration law that will apply to 98% of the people. Now, you might have some people that are 110 years old that don't have and can't even remember where they're from. or where they were born. Okay, fine. You deal with that on a case-to-case basis.
Right.
But you solve the problem for 98% of Americans. But what we do is we have judges, and now we've got more dingbats on the court. I wish I could get on the court. Boy, I'd have a ball. Because I probably know more law than they do.
You'd straighten the thing out.
Yeah, but you look at it and they go, oh, we can't have that because this person loses. No, no, no. Just take care of that person. There's no reason to change the law.
Right.
The law's a good law.
Right.
Just fix it for that person.
And that's the other problem, is that when we see an isolated incident, we tend to blanket the law once again. We look at the law and say, okay,
Right.
well, this one person slipped through the cracks and this one thing happened. And then they say, oh, well, now we have to amend the law. No, you don't have to amend the law. You're right, Tom. You just have to deal with this one thing and solve
right.
this
It's
one
like,
thing.
if you see a drunk on the street, what are we going to do? Pass prohibition? Well, we did that. Okay, never mind. Bad example.
But you're right, though. That's a great analogy. That's absolutely fantastic. Tom, I want to thank you so much for coming on to the show. You got to come back on the show. This has been a great conversation. Tom, give your websites, give your information to my audience here, and yeah, go ahead.
Well, my Facebook is whatever, tom.weaver.501. Kind of like the jeans that I can't wear because my body isn't made for jeans, especially my inseam.
And I'll post everything on my YouTube channel and on my Facebook anyway.
And that's about it. I go by the nickname the Classical Liberal, and which really confuses liberals in Massachusetts because they listen to me and they go, "You're not a liberal," and I said, "I never said I was. I said classical liberal."
That's right.
I said, in the true sense.
That's right.
Before the Jesuits became communists, they were classical liberals.
That's right. Oh my God.
Really?
Oh, we got to talk again. I mean, you're a great historian too. You know your history. I love that. Tom, go ahead.
Anyway, I thank you very much.
Tom, thank you very much. And I will talk to you. I'll most likely see you. Hey, listen, December 18th, 65 Water Street here in Worcester, Mass. At 7 p.m. Mark Fisher, Evan Falchuk, they're coming to speak to the Worcester Tea Party. We'd love to see you there. It'd be great to see you there. It really would. So I'm just sending out that invite.
And if you want, I do a constitutional thing, about an hour and a half. And I've done it for a couple tea parties. I'd love to do it for the Worcester Tea Party.
You know what? I am the media liaison for the Worcester Tea Party. So why don't we think about getting you on for our January event? Because we have one every month.
I start out with the history of the countries because I ask a very important question, and your listeners should understand. Do you understand the Constitution?
I understand it.
Yeah, well, most people will say no. And I follow it, I go, well, do you have an 8th grade education?
Yeah, really?
And they go, well, yeah. And I said, then you can understand the Constitution.
It's simple. It's simple.
Just read it.
I did a multi-part video expose on the Meat and Potato Show over this year while I was doing the candidate interviews. It was about the Convention of States, Article 5. And I started that because I had heard about it, and I had always known about it, but I didn't really quite think about it. I was always busy doing other stuff with the radio show, and I had known about it, and then I had met Hal Shurtleff from the John Birch Society, Hook and Crook, long story short. He had mentioned that, and I said, wow, well, I should do this. And he said, yeah, Chris, you ought to do a thing on your show. You ought to, on your blog. And I said, well, I don't know anything about it. But then I thought to myself, well, wait a minute. What a great way to learn about Article 5 and Convention of States by just doing a video expose. And then, well, here we are 6 parts of this video expose later. I'm actually very knowledgeable about Convention of States and Article 5. And I can tell you right now, folks, it's a bad idea. I can tell you right now.
You and I will differ on.
Okay.
I think we've gone over the Rubicon as far as our current. I think the only thing that can change is us.
Sure. Right.
But we'll have to go into. That's where Catherine and Hal and I disagree. I think it's I think it's the only thing that can possibly save us.
So why don't we plan you come on to our Tea Party thing in January. I'll be talking to you in the loop, and I'll have you back on before then, and you can be part of the next expose for my Article 5. And Tom, thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for coming on to the Meat and Potatoes Show.
All right, thank you. Go
All right.
TCU.
All right. Enjoy, sir. Good night.
Good night.
Well, there you go, folks. Tom Weaver. That's what we do here on the Meat and Potatoes Show. Conservative talk and awesome rock.